Hey everybody, this is Dream, and today we have a 4-game NBA slate and then a 10-game NFL slate for you. Or sorry, 13-game NFL slate for you. Before I get started, can you guys smash the subscribe button? That really helps the channel a lot. Uh, sorry, I hit something, knocked it off the table. So let's go ahead and get into this in these slates here. We'll start with the NBA. It's gonna be a shorter slate. We have some injuries though to look at here for the Clippers. Kawhi Leonard's out for the Pelicans. Murray and Murphy are out for the Hawks. Bogdanovich is out for Oklahoma City. Hartenstein and Jalen Williams remain out for Milwaukee. Middleton is out for Portland. Sharp and Williams and Thibault are out for the Brooklyn Nets. Waterford, Bogdanovich, and Sharp are out. So as for these 3 games, 2 of the games have high totals and 2 have low. Milwaukee, Brooklyn, and Atlanta, Oklahoma City have the high totals, and then the Pelicans, Trailblazers game and the Clippers Warriors game have a lower total. All these games project to be somewhat 9-point games, with the exception of that Pelicans game, which is a 6-point game in their favor. So let's look at the guards here. So for point guards, Scoot Henderson jumps off the page as a pretty decent play, even though he's in a little bit of a tougher matchup. I think he's definitely capable today as he's getting decent minutes and he's getting a high usage rate in those games. The injury situation there in Portland is also giving him a little bit of a boost with other guys being inconsistent. So I think he's in a good spot. He doesn't always start those, so keep that in mind, but he is capable of having a solid game here anyway, and he's nicely priced. We also like Podzimski for the Warriors here in the 2 games this season. He's averaging 25 minutes a game, and he's had one good game and kind of one off game, but he's definitely capable of a high scoring game here, especially with some of the other players on the Warriors being somewhat limited. And I do think this game will be a game that is going to be a little bit tougher for some players, so I think he'll get a little bit more minutes in this one. So I think he's in a good spot there. Dyson Daniels, though, probably my favorite play at this position for the Hawks. He can also play a shooting guard. He's been fantastic in his first 2 games here with the team. I think with Trae Young, it really opens up his ability, and he looks like he's getting a lot of peripheral stats. So do keep that in mind because he may not get as many of those. He had six blocks and steals in the first game and 4 in the second. But even if he doesn't get those, he should still be able to score enough fantasy points to pay off at this nice price point. We can also consider Ben Simmons, DeAnthony Melton, Trae Young, and Shea Alexander at this position. Point guards are pretty deep today. Looking at our shooting guards, this position is a little bit more limited, and Podzinski and Daniels can both play here. But another guy that we do like are Wiggins for the Warriors. He's been pretty decent in his first 2 games of the season. His minutes are somewhat limited, but he's been shooting the ball pretty well, and he's getting peripheral stats, which is actually somewhat unusual for him. So as long as he's getting some decent things, then we're definitely going to look at him as a viable option at $5,100. He's actually gone down in price, which is interesting as well, though it's a tougher matchup than the first 2 games for them. So I do think he's got some utility here, but he definitely carries a little bit of risk. Also consider Anthony Simmons at this position for the Golden State Warriors. For the small forwards, this position is somewhat limited. There's not a lot of great options, but the top couple options are really solid. One being Jalen Williams for Oklahoma City. He's been fantastic in his first couple games. He had a big game against Chicago, and he had nearly a triple double. I think he has that kind of potential game in and game out. He did struggle against Denver a little bit, but this matchup's a lot better, and I think he's going to have some utility here to be a solid play on the slate. Very close to being a core play for me. Cam Thomas, meanwhile, he's a little bit over. Sorry, he's going to be a very bust play for the slate. And then Cam Johnson, he's going to be a bit cheaper and have some utility here as his minutes are pretty good. Though he hadn't 5x yet at this price point, but he's definitely capable of it against a team that he's been strong against in the past. Looking at our power forwards, we do like Jalen Williams here as well. But Jalen Johnson for Atlanta looks really solid today. He's been good in his first 2 games. He's a little bit pricey, but he definitely has some potential today, though he is against one of the better defenses on the slate. I do think he's capable, though, of a really solid game as his minutes will be in the mid 30s, even up to 40s, and he's going to have a lot of upside in this one. Zion Williamson is also looking solid today. He's a guy that if he gets full minutes and he doesn't get hurt, then he's going to have that opportunity to have big games every single game. It's just a question if he could stay healthy this season. But right now, he looks solid. Again, he's playing against a very weak opponent, and he's going to have a lot of upside in this one. In the first game of the season that he played against Portland, in fact, he scored almost 50 fantasy points. He's definitely capable of that, and he's definitely underpriced. I think he'll price point up over 9,000 at some point soon, so he's definitely worth a look here. Chet Holmgren, though, also looks absolutely fantastic here. He's been solid in both games so far this season, and then he gets a favorable matchup again today, so he's definitely looking underpriced with that 50 to 60 fantasy point upside that he has. He's getting tons of rebounds and points, and he's doing peripheral stuff as well. Again, if you ignore the peripheral stats, though, he still pays off really nicely at this price point. And so, again, he is a core play who was one yesterday as well. Cam Johnson can also play at this position. I do like him a lot. Looking at their centers, Trace Jackson Davis has been solid for Golden State Warriors in these first couple games. I think this is a pretty good matchup for him to continue that trend, though his price point is a little bit higher than it was against Utah. His minutes are really the concern here, is if he gets enough minutes to pay off, but he's definitely capable. But that they're just pretty deep at this position, though, so to keep that in mind. Uh, Donovan Clingan is kind of a cheap Hail Mary play for Portland today. He doesn't play a ton of minutes, but in the first two games, he did manage to get some decent options at the usage aspect because he got some blocks and rebounds. I still think he's high risk because he does require some blocks to get these fantasy points, but he can definitely do it. And he's one of the only few sub 4,000 plays on this entire slate that looks decent. Then Zion Williamson and Chet Holmgren can also play at this position. So I do think this slate is going to be interesting. Not my favorite slate on for basketball, but it's with a small slate like this, you're gonna have to take a few chances, and so that's kind of what I'm looking at there. Let's look at this NFL slate here. Um, NFL slate does look pretty good today. We do have a couple. It's a pretty deep slate, and I do think there's a couple games that have some weather, like the Buffalo game. But I think that overall the slate should be pretty high scoring. If we look at our quarterbacks, we actually have a lot of cheap quarterbacks that look really solid today, and it's hard to ignore that. Bo Nix looks like he's in an absolutely fantastic matchup here against Carolina, and he looks like somebody I'm going to try to roster in some lineups today as he just has some solid upside, and he's going to be high owned today as well, so to keep that in mind. But he's nicely priced at a very low price, which helps you pay up at other positions. Caleb Williams is also priced really good here for the Bears. He's had some ups and downs so far this season, but he does have a really high upside, and he seems like he's figured out the last couple games. And he has a very favorable matchup against Washington, so he's definitely worth a look here. Geno Smith is a guy that has always been kind of cheap, but has some upside in certain situations, and he definitely has it in this one where there's going to be a lot of passing and high scoring potential. So I definitely think he's in a solid spot as well. He's also underpriced here at this price point. All three of those guys are priced really in the same area. The ownership here will be Bo Nix, Tua Tagovailoa, Jordan Love, and Caleb Williams. So I think going kind of chalky at this position, not bad, simply because you can pay up for running backs and wide receivers in that regard. Looking at our running backs, Breece Hall looks really good for the Jets. He's had some ups and downs this season, but the last two games he's been solid, and he's got a favorable matchup against New England, who hadn't stopped anybody. I think he's in a solid spot. He is expensive, but he's definitely worth the cost today and a very favorable matchup. Javonte Williams for oh, where'd he go? For Denver. Oh, he's $6,000. Sorry, he has a favorable match with Carolina. He definitely has some potential here. He also gets a couple targets in the air, which adds to him, and I think he has he's got some touchdown potential in this one, and he's got a very favorable rush defense to go against, and he's one of my favorite plays at this position due to his price point. J.K. Dobbins also looks really good for the Chargers, who have been inconsistent this season, and he hasn't been getting as many touches in some games, but he should have some upside here to have some potential as kind of a flex option. Joe Mixon also looks interesting today for Houston, though he's not a must play as he's a little bit overpriced. He does have a great matchup though, and he looks similar to Breece Hall in his potential today, and he's a good contrarian away from him. If we look at the ownership though, Breece Hall, Javonte Williams, J.K. Dobbins, Devin Echane, and Tony Pollard will be the top guys there. Looking at wide receivers, we're going to start with Tyreek Hill. Uh-oh. For Miami, he should be playing today. He was questionable, but he's now active, so to keep that in mind. He should get a lot of opportunity today. He has struggled this season at times, but he has been battling some injuries, though I do think he's capable of a big game here, especially if everything looks good for Tua. And so I think he is going to have a lot of potential to have a big game. In the first game of the year, he had a monster game with Tua, but I think he will have a good opportunity here. Now, uh, Jalen Waddle, rather, for Miami also looks solid today. He's had some good games this season as well, but he hasn't broke the 10 fantasy points since the first game of the year. But I look for him to have a lot of targets today and have a lot of potential, so he's definitely in play as well. Jalen McMillan, let's see, McMillan, MCC, sorry. For Tampa Bay, looks really solid today. He's a cheap play. He has had some ups and downs this season, but he's definitely capable of getting some more targets today as he's emerged to be one of the better options on the team today with the injuries on the slate. So he's definitely cheap and going to have some opportunities. Uh, Lad McConkey looks interesting for the Chargers. I keep saying the Clippers. Sorry, NBA mode. Uh, but he's going to have some targets today in this matchup, though he is questionable. But it does look like he should play. But if he doesn't play, then obviously don't use him and use McMillan instead. But he definitely has some utility here. Trey Palmer also looks good for Tampa Bay. Cedric Tillman for Cleveland, and then Drake London is probably another cheap or more expensive option for Atlanta that you could utilize with some touchdown potential in the positive matchup. The ownership here: Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, Lad McConkey, Andre Ilisovas, Stefan Diggs, Drake London, Take Dell, and DJ Moore. As we look at our tight ends, we do like Cade Otton the best today. He has some good potential on the slate for Tampa Bay as he is going to emerge as a player that's going to get more opportunity on the slate with the other injuries to wide receivers here. And in the last game, he did really solid. He's had some good games this season. He hadn't really had a terrible game at this price point, so he's definitely worth a look at least since week 3. So he has a pretty good opportunity here to be continue to be good. David Njoku for the Cleveland Browns also looks interesting today. He had a kind of blow up game last week, and I look for him to continue to have some more opportunities, especially against a defense that's terrible against the pass, like like the Ravens have been so far this year. We also like Evan Ingram. Oopsie, Evan Ingram for Jacksonville. He's got a favorable matchup here, and he's definitely got some potential, though his targets have been inconsistent so far in the first 2 games since being back from injury. I think he is in a good spot, though. Brock Bowers and Travis Kelce can also fit in here, and they're a little bit more expensive. As the ownership goes, K-Dot and David Njoku, Grant Caltara, and then Evan Ingram. Looking at our defenses, really there's just 2 defenses that I'm really considering a lot today, and that's Broncos and Ravens. Broncos have a best match with Carolina, and this is definitely a favorable situation for them. They've been scoring good fantasy points all year, and it's kind of hard to ignore that. And even though they're priced more expensive than they have been, they're in such a good situation that I think they're probably the best option on the board. The Ravens do have an interesting matchup against Cleveland, who are going to be uh, in a tougher situation with their quarterback play, but the Ravens definitely have some upside in this one, but they haven't been as good this year as we normally see. As for the ownership, the Ravens and the Chargers will have some ownership. I don't know really that I like the Chargers too much here, even though the New Orleans has struggled with the pass. I think they still have some good opportunity with the run today. So as for the ownership goes, that's not ideal. With that said, guys, thank you for liking, commenting, subscribing. If you have any comments,